are listening to the Reformanda Initiative podcast, where we discuss and analyze Roman Catholic theology from an evangelical perspective. My name is Reed Carr. I am the Associate Director of the Reformanda Initiative. Usually, as you all know, Clay Kennard, our Communications Director, is the one who introduces our show and puts it together for us. But Clay is not with us at the moment. He is out and about on the streets of Rome with a group of students doing a Reformation walk as one of the initiatives that our ministries are involved in. So we're thankful for Clay's effort there. I'm actually not in Rome myself either right now, not at the country, but I am joined by our director of the Reformanda Initiative, which is, of course, Leonardo Chirica, who is in Rome. Just got home after a busy day of teaching classes. So Leo, it's good to be with you, even though remotely. And how are things there in Rome?
Yeah, bonsoir, Reed. Je sais que tu es en France. I know that you are in France, so bonsoir you.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, your French is far better than mine, so I won't even try to embarrass myself. But yeah, it would be better for me not to do anything.
Okay.
But yes, I'm joining from yes, thank you. Joining from France, and but we wanted to get together and lots to talk about, lots to catch up on. We've been trying to connect over the last couple of weeks, but schedules have been busy and people have been out of town, so we finally found a time to get together and talk. And one of the things that we want to talk about is one of your more recent Vatican files, which is very timely because, as most of our listeners, I would imagine, will know, Pope Francis is not doing well at all. He continues to be, I think it was yesterday was his 10th evening, if I read correctly, in the hospital at Gemelli, which is a hospital in Rome. And remains in critical condition, breathing issues, I think kidney issues now as well. And so, people are expecting a very, very good possibility of him maybe passing away from this. If not, the papacy will be difficult to go under his leadership. And you just wrote recently, Leonardo, on this movie that recently came out on Netflix called Conclave. And so we very well may see the Catholic Church involved in a conclave very soon, depending on Pope Francis and how he does with this critical situation. But he's had poor health for quite some time, and has been declining recently. So of course we disagree with Pope Francis on many things, but we do want to pray for him, pray that he knows the Lord. But help us think through this issue. Help us think through the movie, The Conclave. Is it realistic? Does it correlate to what's going on? What can we expect from the processes that will go into place once a new conclave is in progress?
Well, as you said, Pope Francis is not well, but he also has already signed a resignation letter. Is not official, so it's not. He's still in full office, but in case he thinks he's no longer able to continue his ministry, he has already made it public that the letter is with the Secretary of State, and it only needs to be signed again in order to become effective. So, we don't need Pope Francis to die just to think about the possibility of a conclave to be convened. And the last conclave was not convened after the death of the reigning Pope, Pope Benedict, but after his resignation. So that's another possibility. When the papacy ends, everything stops at the Vatican. The papal apartment is closed off. Offices are closed, and everything kind of waits for what's next. And what's next is the meeting of cardinals coming from all over the world. There are more than 130 now, and those who have powers and the right to vote, those who are under 80 years old. And the movie depicts exactly that scenario, that the Pope has just died, and so cardinals, before the official conclave is actually convened, they come together and they talk about the present and the future of the church. And there are different parties, different candidates, different different evaluations on how the church is going, how the church is to expect from the new Pope, and there are discussions taking place. I think it's very realistic that you see a bunch of old men, and the movie also depicts them as having health issues, taking pills, night pills, sleeping pills, as an ordinary 80 years old or 75 years old would do, and it welcomes it introduces the public to the dynamics that take place in those discussions. There is a progressive faction or party. There is a more conservative one discussing recent openings by the preceding Pope. There are centrist voices trying to balance the two extremes, and past issues are mentioned, scandals and things that undermine the credibility of one candidate and the other. And so I think it's a realistic, intriguing account of what happens in the conclave. And I think we could expect something, of course, similar, not exactly the same, but something similar happens in real life when the discussions taking place before people enter the Sistine Chapel, where the official conclave begins, and the doors are closed, and so extra omnes, the announcement is given, everyone outside, extra omnes. And then the ballots begin to be taken, and votes are counted, and if none of the candidates gets more than 75% in the first 5 or 6 ballots, then the majority goes down in order for the strongest candidate to emerge. And then that what happens in the movie. In the end, one after the other, all the candidates that seemed to be strong before the conclave were not elected, not receiving enough votes, and all of a sudden a surprise happens. I don't know if we can spoil the movie for our listeners. If we can tell.
Just say spoiler alert, and then if anyone wants to close their ears, they can. So the spoiler alert has been warned, so you can tell them what. Now we can tell them what the surprise is.
Yeah. Everybody knows, because there are multiple reviews and multiple discussions having taken place on the movie. All of a sudden, the most recent candidate, the most recent cardinal that was nominated by the previous Pope, begins to get more votes, and as ballots go on, he receives more and more votes, to the point of becoming the elected Pope. And he is a very unique person. He's a Cardinal of Baghdad, Iraq, so comes from the very end of the world, so to speak, not from the centers of the Catholic Church, or from the periphery, something that Francis likes very much. He advocates for the church for the poor, the church of the last ones, the church of the weak, and he himself has ministered in war zones, so he knows what it means for people who suffer, people who starve, people who are persecuted. So he's the perfect portrait of a kind of Franciscan candidate, the candidate that Pope Francis would really love to have as the new Pope. And there is more than that. And I don't know if we now have to issue another spoilers alert, because there's more than that.
I think one spoiler alert is enough, so you can keep going. They would have turned it off already.
Okay. Good. And so the very unique thing is that this candidate that appears to be very meek, very gentle, coming from the ends of the earth, coming from the periphery of the Catholic Church, and yet representing the Church of the poor, the Church of the weak, he's also intersex. You know, he's not. He was supposed to go to Geneva to have a transition surgery in order to remove the feminine genital traits, and he didn't do that, and so he kept both genital traits, both feminine and masculine, and so he's registered as a man, but he also has some feminine traits, and so all of a sudden, after and nobody knows that apart from the Pope who had recently died, and so once the conclave, the Assembly of Cardinals, becomes aware of his sexual intersex identity, it's too late, because he's already been voted in, and there is a time of chaos and confusion. What is going to happen? But the vote has been taken. The official announcement has already been made. There's no possibility to go backwards. And so the movie ends there with the elected Pope, intersex Pope, who is about to show up at the balcony at St. Peter's Basilica to be presented before the public. And there is where the movie ends. And of course, it raises all kinds of interesting observations to make, that I think on purpose the movie director and the writer of the book, because it is based on a book, wanted to pinpoint, the willingness to really have a movie that portrays and even exaggerates and even puts to extreme consequences the kind of line that Pope Francis has been advocating for during his pontificate. The Church of the poor, the Church of the periphery, against clericalism, against ecclesiastical apparatus, and even as far as going to endorsing a person that is sexually ambiguous, to say the least, and that is very, I think, very done on purpose, to on the one hand to endorse or to advocate for the agenda that Pope Francis has been pushing forward during the 12 years of his pontificate, and even to push it further than that, because this is something that maybe even Pope Francis had never imagined that could happen. But as far as the movie goes, it happened, and it happens, and so the trajectory of Pope Francis is given taken to the extreme, and the Church has no longer weapons, ways to retract or to go back. It is under the rule of circumstances that have been gone way, way beyond what was expected of them, and the church finds it now in a situation that completely changes the reality of the church that has been for centuries distinguishing, advocating for a clear-cut gender identity, male or female, and yet now the church's head, the Pope, is a confused person from a gender point of view.
So how has the movie been received in the Catholic community? Have you seen reviews or people giving their thoughts from Roman Catholics? How are they receiving Conclave?
Well,
what are their thoughts about it?
Yeah, the secular people, secular reviews coming from secular authors, commentators, they tend to like it. They tend to see, the intriguing plot and the unexpected ending. More Catholic traditional reviewers, they say they have had the tendency of, appreciating the story, the plot as far as the conclave goes, but they dismissed the ending on how the movie ends with the new pope being an intersex person. They say, "Oh, this is nonsense. This is totally out of the blue, or totally out of reality, and it's an ideological ending. It's an LGBTQ plus type of agenda that is going on there, and nothing to do with Pope Francis, nothing to do with the present leadership of the church." So a variety of reactions, as most movies receive from different people, different sources.
So it's an accurate microcosm. It represents the microcosm of the Catholic Church. The conservatives who are not happy about it, the progressives who may like it, and it's very representative of what's generally what happens in the Catholic Church.
But I think coming from as an outsider, I think the movie has a point. I mean, of course, it exaggerates. Of course, it makes it extreme. But actually, if you think carefully about the outcome, it is, yes, extreme, but not so extreme. It is only a push forward, maybe an outcome of what is already going on in as far as the present state of the Catholic Church. Who am I to judge? That was one of the first questions that Francis publicly asked when himself asked what to do with homosexual people or transgender people. Who am I to judge? And then up to fiducia supplicans, the end of the 2023, when benedictions, blessings were allowed to people in homosexual relationships or even in transsexual relationships, and now receiving the blessing of the church. And along the way, all different steps made by Francis in order to have the church become more hospitable, more welcoming, not being confused with a border where passports are asked, but where everybody is welcomed in. And so that's true. That is what Pope Francis has been doing. The movie simply maybe intensifies it and puts another extreme edge to the trajectory, but doesn't really invent anything.
I mean, it is, again, just looking at it on a very, let's say, more superficial level. As you mentioned, as anybody who's seen the movie, there is this the conservatives who are wanting a more conservative pope, the progressives wanting a more progressive, and you have some people in the middle. I mean, that's certainly the reality as we look at a possible conclave in the very near future.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, I've been listening to just some Roman Catholics actually have discussions about it. What do they think might happen? And you hear this exact language, right? You have people who would like to see the progressive doors that Pope Francis opened. Can you just stay open? Maybe even push them open further. People who want to see those doors closed. See people want to find a middle road. It's the same discussion that we talk about often as the Roman Catholic push and pull, the tug of war, back to a more conservative understanding of Roman Catholicism, or representation of it, or more progressive. But as we look at the real world, I mean, you said, how many cardinals did you say?
130 plus,
130 plus. And how many of those have been nominated by Francis?
70%.
Do we know? 70%. Okay, 70%. So there's obviously a political element to the papacy as well. You are going to elect and nominate cardinals who are think more like you do, who hopefully will elect and nominate another pope after you who thinks like you do. And as we look at again the possibility of an upcoming conclave, what is the gossip, I should say? What are the possibilities coming out of it? Are we seeing this conservative, progressive push and pull, a middle of the road? Even in the movie Conclave, there's a possibility of the first African pope. I think that's even a reality. That's a possibility as well. So again, being an outsider, but an outsider who follows these things very closely, you're very knowledgeable on it. How do you see things?
Well, that's a very intriguing question. Of course, everybody is talking about who the next pope is going to be, and I think that the Pope Francis himself in 2023, coming back from his journey to Mongolia, when interviewed on the plane, he said, "I don't know if I'll be able to do the next papal visit to Vietnam, but maybe Pope John the 24th will make it." So John the 24th is an indication of something of a wished candidate, or a candidate that Pope Francis has in mind, recovering the legacy of John the 23rd, who actually convened the Second Vatican Council, who was known as the good Pope, Papa Buono, the good Pope, the good man. He was conservative, rather conservative, but very approachable, very warm, very close to people. And I think that that could be an indication, someone who is neither progressive nor conservative as such, that is not belonging to one of the two most extreme poles, but rather someone in the middle, having a conservative soul, so to speak, but also being warm as in attitudes and relationships, as Pope Francis tried to be. And it is interesting that he didn't mention the next Pope would be Benedict the 17th. He doesn't really think and like the idea of having a theologian Pope, a dogmatic Pope, someone who is strong in doctrine. He didn't say that. He didn't mention having a John Paul III, following the legacy of John Paul II, who was at the same time, very Catholic and very Roman. He doesn't want a strong Pope, a strong personality to be the leader of the Catholic Church. But John the 24th, the good man, very approachable man, perhaps the man who had the courage to convene the council. Perhaps Francis is thinking of someone who has the energy, the vision to convene maybe the Third Vatican Council, having to deal with some of the unsettled ambiguities that the present-day church has been experiencing since Vatican II. The ordination of women, issues like moral issues, some doctrinal issues, sacramental issues, things that are in the air, up in the air, and causing disruptive discussions within the church because they are unsettled. So far, the church has been able to handle them in a Roman Catholic way, but perhaps the indication of a John 24th is also something that reveals the desire of the Pope, the present Pope, to have someone in the future, in the near future, who will have the courage to convene another council capable of resolving perhaps the issues or taking the church forward in the third millennium.
One interesting note on that topic of the possibility of a third Vatican Council, say, or whatever they would call it. But in his autobiography that came out called Hope, was just published in January of this year, so brand new book. Pope Francis talks about he says, oh, people always tell me, are we going to have another church council? And he said, no. He said, we're not ready for a church council. He said, we still have to fully implement the, Vatican II.
Yeah.
Now, so he, and at least in his autobiography, he was adamant about the fact that Vatican II still has to be fully implemented. Now, that's also in light of the fact that the autobiography was written over a period of several years. I can't remember how many, so that comment could have come at any point, and he could have changed his mind. I mean, things change very quickly in the world of politics, and there are political aspects. I mean, the Catholic Church is a church, but it's also, the Pope is the head of a state, and you see a lot of political aspects that come into play in that reality.
True.
But we will see. But that's an interesting. I had actually not heard that yet about the John the 24th. So that's an interesting tidbit there. Let me ask you one question that I think would be helpful for our listeners too. And I guess this would also depend on a context that they may live in, and that will shape their understanding of Roman Catholicism. But there may be the tendency to say, well, I really hope for a conservative pope, somebody who will come back to more traditional truths of the church, as if that were maybe a solution or a positive thing. How should evangelicals think about that aspect of whatever pope is elected next, whether it's middle of the road, progressive, or conservative? How does an evangelical think through that in a healthy way?
Well, yes, that's a good question. The dogmatic commitments of the Catholic Church are not going to change, not depending on a single pope who is going to be selected and voted in. The commitments made at the Council of Trent, commitment made the First Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council, the Marian dogmas, papal infallibility, all these things are not going to be changed. And the only difference is between someone who will place himself on the more Catholic side or on the more Roman side, depending on the kind of balance that the church will find itself in. And it is possible that after a very Catholic pope, it is hardly imaginable to have a more Catholic pope than Pope Francis. It is therefore foreseeable that the next one will be more center left, or center right, and so rebalancing the whole line into a more middle of the road type of line. I think evangelicals, we may like the personality of one or the other, but I don't think that That would make a great change as far as the big picture of the church is concerned. The church is not committed to Scripture alone, is not committed to Christ alone, is not committed to faith alone, regardless the traditional outlook or the progressive outlook of the next pope. And I don't think there is a significant hope for true biblical reformation within the Catholic Church because of its commitments. So there may be different interpreters, but the script is what it is. It's like having a director of a choir or an orchestra. He may change the interpretation of the script. He may change some of the things of the performance, but the script is what it is, and the orchestra is what it is. The instruments are what they are, and these things are not going to change. So unless God moves in and supernaturally, in an extraordinary way, in a supernatural way, comes in and determines a radical change of the reality of the church, the Catholic Church. But the Catholic Church has built itself in such a way that it may move on even in spite of the leaders or regardless the orientations of one as opposed to the other. It's a well-established, well-functioning system that, of course, needs leadership, but the leadership only maybe determines the pace or the speed of the ship, not the shape of the ship and the overall stability of the ship.
Is there any, as far as you're aware, in the history of the Catholic Church, has a sitting pope ever passed away during a year of Jubilee?
I don't know. I haven't researched that.
Yeah. Would that add any? I mean, I guess it would just add an interesting element. Of course, 2025. We've talked about it. It's a big year for pilgrims in the Catholic Church, but that would be an interesting element too.
Yeah. It would be an interesting element. The proximate parallel that comes to mind is actually John 23rd. He died during the Second Vatican Council. He had convened, and so it was during the council the Church had to convene a conclave to elect Paul VI, who was the one who ended the council. So during the council there was also a conclave. But the Jubilee, the council was more of a leadership meeting, important as it was, but not involving the masses, the crowds. Whereas the Jubilee year has been involving lots of people. And if something happens during the Jubilee year, we might expect that the tension around the Catholic Church will increase and become even more intense.
Well, we'll certainly keep a close eye on it, obviously, and as you mentioned, even regardless of this, it's hard to believe that Pope Francis would get, even if he pulls out of this sickness a little bit, that he would get back to a position where he could be active as a pope. So he's already signed that letter of resignation, even though it's not public yet. But we'll keep a close eye on it, and then once we know more, certainly if there's a conclave or a new pope, we would certainly look closely into who that person is, what kind of agenda they possibly might represent, and all of that. It's very interesting. One thing I want to make a brief transition to is you wrote even previously than your article on the conclave, which is very pertinent, as we said now, on this growing number of Roman Catholic apologists, especially in the North American context, who are appealing to a lot of disappointed, disillusioned, frustrated evangelicals. And you juxtapose that a bit too with kind of the European reality with Catholicism. But tell us just a little bit about, I know our listeners will find it interesting. They may even know or be familiar with some of these personalities if you mentioned a couple of them. But give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on, especially in the North American context with these Roman Catholic apologists appealing to young evangelicals. You say in your article, it used to be where you would hear much more about Catholics converting to evangelicalism. Not that doesn't happen, it certainly does, but there's this trend becoming ever more popular of evangelicals crossing the Tiber, as we say. The Tiber is the river that runs through Rome, and joining the Catholic Church. What's the appeal? How are they appealing to them? And how can evangelicals think through them? I mean, those are three big questions, but help us understand what's going on there.
Well, yes, the big numbers tell us that on a global scale, the number of people who are transitioning from Catholicism to the evangelical faith is bigger than the reverse. So in terms of the big data, we're still seeing that the process of people changing or leaving Catholicism outgrows the number of people who are becoming Catholic away from evangelicalism. But especially, as you mentioned, in United States and also other Anglo-Saxon countries like Britain, Australia, and Brazil, places where Catholics and evangelicals are, roughly speaking, at a similar percentages and have similar sizes, or roughly speaking similar. This is what is happening now is the fruit of the so-called new evangelization that was promoted by John Paul II back in the late 90s of the last century, and officially launched by Pope Benedict with the institution of Pontifical Council for the New Evangelization, encouraging Catholics to becoming outspoken in their attempts at reaching out to lapsed Catholics, nominal Catholics, as well as reaching out to inquirers and people of other traditions or faiths. And it seems that as far as the American context is concerned, sectors of the North American Catholic Church has taken the new evangelization seriously. And so with the usual American dynamism and passion, there have been institutions, universities, programs, dioceses organizing events and initiatives leading to these efforts of the new evangelization. And as part of this big picture, I think that is the picture where we can place these Catholic apologists. Then you have technology. That's another piece of the picture. You have the new evangelization as a framework. You have technology, YouTube, social media. And these younger apologists have become very experts in communicating, in using social media, in producing videos, in invading the public square, the digital public square, with videos, materials, discussions, conversations, becoming popular even with the general public. And taking the conversation, the evangelical Catholic conversation, into a very different stage. No longer the Catholics being passively receiving the evangelical attempts and evangelizing them, but actually reversing the tide, and many Catholics becoming engaged in purposeful Catholic evangelization of evangelicals. And the third piece is also worth mentioning. Most of these Catholic apologists are former evangelicals of one type or the other. And so they are converts. They're not traditional Catholics in the sense of having inherited Catholicism um, from their families or cultural background. They are former evangelicals, disillusioned with evangelicalism, abandoning practices that were considered to be shallow or superficial or inconsistent, and embracing Catholicism as lovers of tradition, the institution, everything the Catholic Church has to offer, understood and perceived in its best terms. And so putting together all these different pieces, you have this phenomenon of YouTube defenders of the Catholic Church, especially targeting evangelicals, because in the U.S., of course, you have this vast amount of people who do come from a kind of evangelical education or culture, and so that is the audience they speak to, and the same is true as far as Brazil or Australia or the UK, and the kind of apologetics that they offer is very, I call it textualist. That is very centered on a compilation of text after text, quotation after quotation, citation after citation, compiling the argument in a cumulative way. And so kind of throwing quote after quote as if the argument could be a winning one if one add yet a more quote and more citation backing the argument itself. And at times I find this kind of arguments very poor in theological breadth, in historical awareness, and in self-critical attitude. These apologists they have a picture of the Catholic Church very idealized, very they project onto the Catholic Church everything they think it is true, it is good, and it is beautiful, and they find it difficult to have a more realistic picture of the Catholic Church, and of course they project onto the evangelical churches all the worst features that they can imagine of, and so this kind of straw man over against this idealized, holy, beautiful, and true church, based on quotation after quotation, and then forming chains of citations from the Bible, the Church Fathers, the medievals, the councils, church pronouncements, and of course cherry picking citations and quotations from different sources, but not paying attention to other quotations, other citations, and the complexity of quoting the Church Fathers. They think that church history is very simple, simplistically reproducible by way of adding a quotation. And of course, patristics is a large field of study, and I find this kind of approach very selective and very weak in many ways. But it seems to be very powerful in terms of the force of the apologetic effort that is put into these initiatives, and it is worth observing the phenomenon. And of course, there are counter-evangelical apologists or initiatives trying to respond, but there is an imbalance there. The Catholic initiatives are far more numerous and stronger and intentional than the few and times weak evangelical attempts at responding to these initiatives.
I think another challenge, I think we mentioned this on our last episode, is that some of the things too that are said just aren't true.
Yeah.
I think we talked about a Youth with a Mission article that was written to help Protestants understand Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
Either what is said is not true, or they're written in a way that is technically true, but very, very misleading, saying, that Catholics don't believe that salvation comes through grace, but we do, just like Protestants. But we know that's not true. Yes, there is an element of grace there, but not in the way that the Bible teaches it. And all you have to do is come to Rome during the year of Jubilee to see that that's not the case. Or I know a popular YouTube personality, one you've actually engaged with yourself, Trent Horn. Catholics don't worship Mary, don't venerate Mary, or we're not told to pray to Mary. Those kind of things aren't true. They're just not true. No. So that's another thing that you have to wade through is you assume, and we don't want to assume that they're lying on purpose, but someone like that you would assume is telling the truth, but some of the things just aren't accurate to Roman Catholicism, or certainly not the practice of Roman Catholicism. So let's end on this question. Like you said, there's just a ton of material out there dominating the YouTube channels. You got Bishop Barron out there, Word on Fire. You got my Father Mike Schmitz. You've got the Pints with Aquinas guy appealing to evangelicals. Like you said, there's just this almost like if we can get enough text proof together, the more text that we have, the more citations that I have, the more church fathers that I quote throughout history, medieval, the scholastics, whoever it may be, church fathers, patristics, and it's kind of almost like overwhelm you with data to see that what I'm saying is true, and you've got nothing on me. So how does a young evangelical deal with that?
Well, from a European perspective, that is very strange because it doesn't happen here. Here, the kind of Catholicism we are used to is very open-minded, ecumenical, not bothering about doctrinal precision, always wanting to affirm the other and not challenge the other, and always putting forward the argument that our differences are complementary perspectives on the same things and not alternatives. And so the attitude, the language, the posture of these apologists is very different from what we're used to here in Europe, where the dialogue between evangelicals and Catholics from the Catholic part tends to be very ecumenical and affirming and not apologetic at all. And so this is one aspect to be considered. The other is to realize that these Catholic apologists, they have a very selective, narrow-minded view of the reality of the Catholic Church. They want to see the Catholic Church in the way they want to see it. They don't want to see it as it is. The Catholic Church is not only the house of beauty, goodness, and truth. It is the house of devotions. It is the house of the practices. It is the house of gross, paganly influenced practices, and you have to go to a shrine, an average shrine in wherever you want to go, to see that Catholicism is influenced by a number of factors, and the intellectual tradition, the patristic tradition, or the sophisticated philosophical tradition are only one piece of a much bigger puzzle made of practices, rituals, and devotions that are contrary to this very intellectualized account of Catholicism. You need to come to Rome. You need to go to Fatima, Portugal, to see people crawling in front of Mary. You have to go to again Fatima to see parts of the human body transform into candles that are offered to Mary for these parts of the body to be healed, to receive healing. You have to go to St. Pio's as a shrine here in Italy, you have to go to the various Marian shrines around the world to see that what they're talking about is not the Catholicism that is out there. It is just a selected, sophisticated, intellectualist, very Western, very North American depiction of Roman Catholicism. But Roman Catholicism, by and large, is not what they advocate for, is something that is very diverse. And that is one point. Second point is that even as far as their methodology is concerned, their approach is very selective. And every church father, every single church father is a universe that cannot be univocally be quoted in support of the Catholic Church. Actually, the reformers in the 16th century, namely Calvin and Bullinger and Vermigli, they were all convinced that on all the major decisive points of doctrine, actually the church fathers were more on the side of the Protestant Reformation than on the side of Rome. And so it is only a selective reading of the fathers that they are practicing, although they accumulate citations, but they don't read the fathers in their complexity, in their nuances, and their multiple levels of their work. And so that's another dead end where they are leading the conversation, that they want to win the argument based on the number of quotations, but they're not doing justice to the fathers that they're quoting. They're only selectively using them for the purpose of their micro argument. And I think there is a point. There is room to respond. There is room for people who are called to be part of this conversation. But as far as I'm concerned, I think that what they're missing is the view of Catholicism as a system. It's not as a bunch of an accumulation of quotation or a bunch of practices that come out of church tradition, but is a system that allows, indeed demands for different parts to be held together. Philosophy, piety, practices, sacraments, traditions, legends, relics, venerations, shrines, statues, etc. You name them, and you have them, and all of this is Catholicism. Most of Catholic people don't have a clue of a single quotation that they refer to, and yet they're Roman Catholic, because Roman Catholicism is not the religion of the book or the religion of the books. Roman Catholicism is the religion of the living tradition that has a written coded language in writings, but it moves on in sacramental ways, in sentiment, in sensory waves, in ways that touch on the imagination, the sense of belonging, the sense of participation. These are the chords of Catholicism, not the intellectual one. The intellectual one is just one of the many chords, and most Catholics are Catholics not because of the intellectual chord, but because of the other chords. And these apologists don't have a clue, and don't even make reference to it. They don't know. Perhaps they don't know. They come from Texas. They come from the Bible Belt. The only reality of Catholicism they know is the reality of intellectual Catholicism coming out of a Protestant culture based on reading practices centered on texts. But this is a very narrow view of Catholicism, not the best or the most comprehensive view of Catholicism. So if people are interested in engaging this dialogue in its own terms, good. But this is not going to be the only or the best way of approaching Catholicism, unless you have a much wider picture of what Catholicism is, and you're able to account for it as a system and not only as a slice of it.
Yeah. Well, it's very good. It's very helpful, and we need more resources out there, such as Same Words, Different Worlds, that help people to understand, especially evangelicals who may be tempted to consider Rome. What is at stake, especially when we talk about the gospel. So, thank you for that, and pray the Lord continues to use this ministry to, hopefully steer people in the right direction. But any closing thoughts before we wrap up? I know we've gone over our usual time, but
I would say bonne soirée, as you are in France. So we're now approaching the evening, and so
that's right. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. And,
bonsoir. Okay.
And enjoy your time in France. And
yes.
Greetings to all of our listeners.
Yes. Greetings to all of our listeners. Leo, thank you as always for this time and for all that you do for the Reprimand Initiative and for the church. You can follow us on Instagram, and we have a page that's been up and running for a little while at Reprimand Initiative, and also on X at Reprimand Rome. So please check us out there, share it, and thank you for listening to us, for your support. And until next time, God bless from Rome and from France tonight. And we bring the greetings of Clay as well, who will put all this together for us. So until next time, thank you very much.